Okay, I've got the Tri-Zone Playfield stripped out, getting ready to clean it. So I did a little triage on what's mechanically not working. Got a couple of intermittent switches, but pretty much everything works. One odd thing is the 4 targets when you play, watch what happens. Left target, the Z registers an actual hit. The O drops, but nothing happens. The N works. The E intermittently works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think what's supposed to happen is once you hit all 4 of them, they pop back up, because I've got intermittent switch contacts here. When I put that around, see how it popped back up. See, they drop. See if I can get that again. Anyway, intermittent switch connection there, then hopefully the drop targets will work right. Well, I've had videos and pictures of the deep cleaning before, but it always amazes me. Here's the first pass. This machine had a lot of tobacco, and it didn't have a Playfield glass, so the smokers, the nicotine, tar, and smoke went right on the Playfield. You can see on the left-hand side, I haven't even touched it yet. On the right-hand side is first pass lightly with the magic erase and alcohol, and I haven't even really gotten into it yet. But dramatic difference. Should be a lot prettier when we get it done. Okay, here's one of those drop targets, and we're looking at this, and the bottom of the playfield is, the playfield's on its side. So normally when the target resets, the coil pushes it up, and then the gravity will drop that down. And then when the target actually is made, it drops this piece down because there's a spring on it, and there's a little board. And if you look up in here, you can see the contacts on the board. So they start up at the top of the board, and then they track down, and these traces probably need cleaned. So let's open that up. So 2 screws hold this on, and you can see it's pretty gunked up. Cigarette smoke, dirt, grime. I'll clean it up and put it back on. Okay, so here's the playfield all cleaned up. I'm going to turn it on and see how we did on the drop targets. Okay, so we'll try. No sound, no points either. Let's see what happens when I drop them. Okay, so the target's reset at least, but this one's not registering a score. I wonder if it's, I didn't get all the gunk off. I'll have to look at it. So I opened up the playfield to have a look at that first drop target to see if I could see what was wrong. Maybe broken wire or something, switch contact not being made. And I don't know, it's hard to focus in, but this diode has a broken connection. So I'm just going to reapply the solder to it and see if that fixes the problem where the drop target doesn't register. Alright, so here's the Tri-Zone with the playfield clean but not yet waxed. So now I started the mechanical repairs before I put everything back on. And a couple things I'm saying. Here's number one, you start a game. Watch those pop bumpers right now, how they're flickering around. Watch what happens when I start a game. Okay, so I thought that this was a problem, that this pop bumper was lit all the time, but thanks to YouTube, what I learned is when the spinner, which is not on here right now, spins, it will rotate the lit pop bumper around. The problem I do have, though, is that pop bumper's dead. And when I was checking the switches out before I cleaned the playfield, that was the only problem I really had, was a dead pop bumper, and I was hoping it was a switch or something like that. Put an ohmmeter on the switch, it's okay, the coil's okay, so I think it's in the back. The other thing I learned is these are intermittent. Yeah, see, this pop bumper right now is dead, so is this one. And so I opened the back of the machine. So if I just keep my hands here, nothing happens, but if I push against the board, I can get it to intermittently start working. Of course, now it's not going to do it with the video on. Trust me, though, it was doing it. I'll have to see if maybe I've got some cold solder joints on the board or something similar, and then I've got to see why this pop bumper's not working. Do I have a bad transistor or a power transistor? So I pulled out the driver board and I'm looking at Q6, which I showed how to find that out on the schematic. And if I go across these two connections on the neighboring transistor, it reads 0.796 meg, so 800 kiloohms. If I go on the Q6 tip, it's reading 6.8 meg, so it's like 9 times as much resistance. So just for grins, I'll check another tip to see, and it reads 700K. So I'm pretty sure I got a bad tip here. I'll just check another one here up here just for grins. Yep, it's reading 800K. So got a bad tip here. And it looks like the transistor that drives it's okay, but I'll probably order a few spares of those too just to have them on hand. Bad tip, hopefully we'll have the game back up. I also am looking at the board for, move the camera here, for cracked solder joints, and I'm not seeing any. So I'll have to break out some intense light, see what I can find. All right, here's a recap on what I've done so far as that bad pop bumper. I replaced Q6 tip and didn't make any difference. I'm actually working on 2 problems right now. One is that lower pop bumper not working, and 2 is intermittent connections on some of the, like the out hole kicker and that kind of thing. So when I headed out to replace Q6, I reflowed several of these solder joints down here, put it back in. Neither one had fixed it yet. So then I went the next step. Even though I thought the transistor seemed to test okay, the signal transistor before the driver transistor, I did replace it. And then I also reflowed these because as I was experimenting around, wiggling these 2 connectors, these 2 connectors here would get intermittent connectivity in the board. So I just put it back in and turned it on, and there's improvement, at least progress. Watch the lower pop bumper when I turn the machine on. See how it locks on? So the one thing I noticed is there's a resistor. I ohmed out the resistors on all of the transistor circuits, and most of them are 2K. The one resistor in the circuit for the lower pop bumper is at 1.5K. The only one that low. So I'm wondering if, I don't have the circuit right in front of me to see if that would not be a high enough resistance so it thinks it's on all the time. So here's the schematic. Here's Q6, that's that tip that I replaced. And then here's Q5, which was the transistor in front of the tip. And when I replaced that, then the coil started energizing and stayed on. So what that means is this line right here is getting pulled high. So I think how this works is on this AND gate, IC6, it's a 7408 chip. It has 2 inputs, one from the MPU, one from the Playfield. I think by default they're both high, and it's an AND gate, so if they're both inputs are high, the output is high by default if nothing's happening. This high comes into this 7402, it's a NOR gate. So if either of these is high, then this is going to be low, which means it's not on. So both high, this is high. If either one of these is high, this is low, nothing's going to happen. So what happens, let's say the Playfield switch energizes, that's going to take that to 0. So 0 and a 1 on an AND gate comes out as a 0. That's pulled low. Pulled low over here would mean that this goes high. High on this transistor, it energizes it, puts voltage on this resistor, which causes current flow to the coil. So the question is, what's not working here? Because this is always on. Is it one of these? Is it this 7402 is not working right? Is it the 7408? Or is it one of the inputs along the way? I think what I'm going to do is put the board back in the machine and compare the Q6 circuit to the maybe Q8 circuit, something close by, and compare the pins because these are both on IC8 and see by default. But if I do that, I think I'm going to have to disconnect power to the coil so I don't burn it up. I disconnected one wire on this lower pop bumper coil, which should be enough. I don't care if the voltage goes high or low here. In fact, I may want to put a meter on there and see what it looks like. But The idea here is that way I can poke around on the driver board with it on and hopefully not cause any trouble. I'm a little worried about on those driver boards how close the pins are, and I've got a logic probe I've never used, so I may pull that out and see if I can do some video on using it. Well, let's see at least how I did with the reflow on those connectors. Turn the machine on. And I disconnected that lower pop bumper so that it won't be on all the time. These were the intermittent connections. Yeah. Looks like everything's working. I had some intermittent stuff here too. So I think the switch connectivity is working okay on the driver board. So I had some good success there. Now I need to break out a logic probe and see what I can learn about that lower pop bumper circuit. So a logic probe is pretty straightforward. It comes with built-in or 2 power clips. You just have to find a ground and a source voltage on the board, and I'm using that capacitor, which I think it's C15, I'm not sure, but it's a capacitor for the 5-volt input, and that powers the logic probe. So then what you do is you touch the logic probe on the areas where you want to see are the signals high or low, and I'm going to reach in here and try to do it's IC8 pin 10, which is low right now. Here's IC8, and it's 1 through 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know if you can see the green light on the logic probe, but that's low right now. Now I'm going to try to do this with the camera on, and something bad's probably going to happen. I'm going to hook this up on that line, and then I'm going to activate the left kicker to see if we see it turn right or turn high, and I know it does. I tested it. I just don't know if I can get it on video, and I'm worried that this probe's going to slide off and short something out. Yeah, I'm not going to try it. I'll just tell you what happens when I have that logic probe on pin 10 and I activate the left kicker switch. I do get a low to high signal. So I'm going to try that now with the lower pop bumper to make sure I get the same thing. I was surprised because the input to the lower pop bumper is low. I was expecting it to be high, which I think tells me the circuit's okay, and I've got something in the circuit after the ICs. Okay, I'm going to try to get this on video. This is the lower pop bumper. The output from the 7402 is pin 10. So I'm going to hook the logic probe up to pin 10. I'm sorry, pin 4. Okay, there's a green low arrow on the logic probe right now on pin 4 of IC8. Now if I activate the lower pop bumper, it goes high. And I don't know if the camera will show. Right next to my thumb it goes red and then green. High for when the switch is actually activated. So that tells me that the entire circuitry up to the output of that IC is good. I have a problem from the IC out, and I'm starting to question that resistor, which is far lower than all other resistors. Alright, so I'm still troubleshooting, and here's a section of the schematic showing Q6 and then a neighboring Q4. Remember the logic probe showed low here, which I would have expected if it was working normally. So I started checking some voltages, working my way back, and I noticed I had 1.2 volts on the base of the tip, and I checked Q4 and I had 0 volts. So then I worked my way back a little bit further, and on the base of the smaller transistor, I have a ½ volt on the base on Q6, whereas I have 0.1 volts in the base of the Q3 transistor. So I think what I've got is this 7402 is leaking, and that's IC8. So on the board, and I have to move the camera. This is IC8, so I'm going to remove it. So I'm going to use my soldering iron and take it out, and then I've got a new 14-pin socket to put in. Then I'm going to have to buy a 7402 chip. I don't have any of those. Well, here I've removed the solder from the back of the board for this chip. You can see the holes now, And all I did is use the solder sucker to take out the solder, and then take a small screwdriver and just, you can peel the legs off if they are sticking slightly. And then I just use a Phillips into this screwdriver and then just pushed the legs in, and they all were loose. And then we'll pull that chip off. I'm probably going to wiggle it around a little bit more, and then I'll put the new socket in. So there's my handy dandy new 14-pin socket. Went in real well, but I don't have any 7402s, and apparently those aren't in my area, so I get to order one, or some. I mentioned that this machine came out of a heavy smoker's house, and so what I've done here in the back of the back glass is I've cleaned this half with just Windex on a paper towel. You spray it on the paper towel, not on the paint, and you wipe it off, and you can see the heavy nicotine on the far side that I haven't done versus what I have done on this side. And here's what the cleaning materials look like. That's just nasty. And I've been cleaning out I'm going to move the camera. Back of the Playfield, same thing. It had a bunch of stuff in it, so coming along nice. So here's the game, got it all put back together, working pretty well. When I was putting it back together, I had one intermittent problem where a ball would go in the kick-out hole and stay there. And then when that happened, if I could get it going again with the glass off, I was able to. One or more drop targets would not register sound, and then when the ball would drain, it wouldn't count off bonus and it wouldn't kick out a ball. To get around that, I'll show you in a second here how to look at the schematic, but wiggling the connections on the CPU board allowed that function to work. So it gets stuck in the out hole, and if I wiggled this connector, it would kick out the ball. So let's go look at the schematic, see what we can see. Alright, so I pulled up the manual for Trizone off of ipdb.org. Doesn't have the schematics in it, but it does have the switch matrix in it. And if you look at the switch matrix, you can see out hole, eject hole, and it was the end drop target. All three of those stopped working, and then when I wiggled the connections, it got better. So I have a problem with row 1 of the switch matrix, and it says that that's white-brown. Here is the Gorgar schematics. Don't worry about the matrix itself, but look at row 1, which is right here, which runs through connection 8J1, and it goes to the driver board 2J3, and it's white-brown. So the white-brown wire is probably our problem here. So I'm going to look at 2J3 on the driver board, and it looks like, here's a picture of the board. This looks like it might be 2J3. It was kind of interesting that when I had the problem, if I wiggled a connection down here on the lamp matrix, it came back to life. So I don't know if I've got a loose wire or something here and I just got lucky. I'll see if I can simulate or get the problem to happen again, and then try wiggling something on 2J3, and it looks like it's going to be pin 9. So let's see what we can find. This might be challenging. The problem is actually happening on the Playfield right now. This is 2J3 right there, and that's what I was afraid of. I just barely touched it and it came to life. So it's going to be this connection, I guess. I will pull this connector off and check pin 9. I'm betting it's got a poor contact on it. I may have to replace the connector. Okay, so I took that connector off and actually removed or pulled the pin out of the housing, the Molex housing, and it looked like it was in okay shape. I tried just bending it out a little bit. I don't know if that's a mistake or not, because these connectors, as they age, maybe it's not going to hold up, but I'm going to try that first. I played through 10 games with no problems, so I'm going to call that one done, at least for now. We'll see if it holds up over time.